And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 109. So today we're going to be talking about a set of photos, I was asked to recreate some old photos that were taken in a village in southwest Scotland called Cowan. And some of these photos were taken well over 100 years ago, one of them I think even 150 years ago. And what they were wanting was to have up-to-date versions, or of the same street scenes and what have you. And so could I take a photo from the same angle? I thought it would be relatively straightforward. Turned out to be way more difficult than I could have ever considered. So I'm going to show you some of the photos and talk through some of the problems with that. That's pretty much what we're talking about today. Plus we have two people have sent in for critique, so I'll be giving a little bit of feedback on that later. We're here live YouTube. Leave me a comment. So yes, like I say, here we are live on YouTube, unless you happen to be watching the recordings. Yeah. And for those of you who are watching live, or those who have watched some recordings, here on the channel on youtube.com/Kim Ayres, you can find all previous 108 episodes. And if you've not done so already, subscribe, be down there somewhere, and make sure you hit the little notification bell as well, so that you know when we have new videos coming on, which tend to be every week. So, yes. Yes, that's right. Leave me a comment. We've got a couple of comments already. Maggie says hello everyone. Meg says good afternoon everyone too. April says hello everyone from a warm, overcast Long Island, New York. May Britt says hello from sunny and windy Copenhagen. And Pat says hi everybody. Bit of a grey day here in Somerset. So we've got everything from sunny and windy, warm and overcast, a bit grey, and here it's been a bit of everything today. It's rather typical May weather in Scotland. Come to think of it, rather typical just weather in Scotland. Right, so, okay, let's have a little thing. So what I wanted, Nadia is here. It says, hi everyone from Fife in Scotland. Well, glad you could make it along, Nadia. So, like I say, what we're going to be talking about today then is kind of recreate some old street scenes. Now, what's the best way to do this? I think what I will do is I will show you then a couple of the old photos that I was asked to recreate, and then I'll talk through a little bit about how I went about it. So, Fiji's arrived as well. Says, good evening everyone. Fiji's in India, saying travelling by train and my internet's a bit dicey. I'm pretty impressed that you're joining us on a train in southern India there, Fiji. So yes, what I'm going to say then is if I do that and then right, not that, do that, yay! So here you can see, so here's an example of an old photo. I've taken a schoolhouse, taken roughly about 1890, I think it was. So we've got the building here, and you can see we've got whether that's mum, dad, and son, or headmaster, headmistress. Oh yeah, and of course, actually, I don't know. You've got maybe perhaps little crying child there down the bottom as well, all sitting outside the door in a rather kind of very formal kind of setup here. Or there was the likes of this one here, which is the Old Wee Brig in Cowan. So this is the bridge going across to... So Cowan was basically, it was a mill town. So the mills were set up because of this river here. Water was diverted, ran the mills, and for a century or so, it was a real thriving village with, and the houses, there was housings built for the mill workers, and there was all sorts of things going on. And then eventually, like so many things, sort of kind of early to mid 20th century, it pretty much fell into disrepair and misuse. Disuse. That's what I meant. Here's a picture of the high street. Got the pub here. Can't quite make out, but it was Craiglaw Arms basically was there. And you can see the sort of looking down the street here. Wonderful old photo. Now in this case, I mean, what you can see down is slightly out of focus people in the background, which goes to show that this was taken on a fairly slow shutter speed. Because of course, if we're talking back to 100 plus years ago, fast cameras didn't exist in quite the same way. So these people all standing in the middle of the road here and must have been standing very still for several seconds. In fact, not just people, looks like we've got ducks or geese sitting there as well. And here's a picture of the mill and the mill workers themselves. And once again, you've got kind of everybody standing there. You've got out of focus person who's maybe they were chuckling or coughing, possibly laughing. It looks like this person who's also slightly out of focus has got a bit of a smile on their face. It wouldn't surprise me at all if this person cracked some kind of joke to which this one just started cracking up laughing. Because in the end, get any group of people, that kind of thing happens. You know, and people from 100 plus years ago were absolutely no different to the rest of us. Slightly different clothes, maybe slightly different accents or language use on some words, but yeah, people are people. So within amongst all these people, you will have had some people who will have probably quite deliberately been standing at the back trying to make sure that they didn't get caught in the photo, because they too hate having their photo taken. So these are some of the photos then that I was presented with to sort of show, you know, and asked if we could kind of recreate. Now there wasn't going to be the opportunity to try and recreate like a picture with all these people in it. These were really as much about creating images which, sorry, just close those there. This was about creating. They wanted to have a photo where you could essentially do like a slider to run back and forth across the screen so that the buildings would match up perfectly. So that picture of the mill with everybody standing out the front, for example, now that mill happens to be disused, broken windows, ivy all over the building. So what happens if you line these two up exactly, and then people can see a kind of then and now. Part of the things like the high street shop shot, for example, though, one of the things we ran into there was the fact that the only day I was able to be and organise with the person who was organising these photos was a Sunday, so there wasn't anybody about. It was a specific day, so the weather didn't want to play ball. A lot of these photos here are in the sunshine. Ours was on a dull day. The street was empty. So you were never going to kind of recreate those photos and have the same atmosphere of the photos. But that idea of trying to shoot it from exactly the same angle, that's really what it was we were trying to do. Okay, seeing that we've got a couple more comments coming in. Oh, Peter says, hi from Peter in Hunmanby near Filey, formerly from Kirkinner. DG. Right, okay, so you moved then, Peter, is that right? April says, sounds nice to VG. All right, talk about VG being on the train, coming home from holiday. Roy's here, says, greetings all. And Becca says, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so we've got a couple more people come in and joined us. Excellent. So, let's go back then. So what I wanted to do then was sort of talk through how some of the photos were much easier to recreate than others. And you see, the biggest problem that you're up against, essentially, when you're trying to recreate the photo, is where do you stand to take the photo? And I had copies of these old photos on my tablet, and I have my tablet with me, and then I'm trying to make a visual adjustment between what I'm seeing in front of me, what I'm seeing on the tablet, and trying to work out how far forward do I stand, how far back do I stand. Now, some of them were relatively straightforward. So, what I'm going to do is let's open up Photoshop a moment, and what I will do is I will show you then, with each one I took several photos, obviously, and then when I'm back at the computer, I then sort of picked out the one that seemed closest to. So if we take, for example, let's flip over to Photoshop, and what I will do is I will take, so we'll drag in that one of the mill workers. And what I will also do then is I will show you one of the photos I took of the mill. So you can see now that it's a very different, you've got the building here, got this tree on the left, that tree is now gone, and the building, broken windows, and covered it. Now, what we're going to do, you can, certainly there's bits of edit with this where I'll maybe lighten the image and all the rest of it, but really what I want to do is talk about lining it up. So if I select all and copy and then paste onto here, Right, now this is pasted onto here. What I need to do is I need to be able to try and line it up on the background. So I'm going to go to my opacity and I'm going to drop that down to something like about 50%. And now what I need to do is try and line up. So I line up some of these photos, some of these windows, and what I can immediately see actually is that, well, this photo was smaller to begin with. So I'm going to zoom out a bit. Control and T gives me the chance to enlarge. Do that. Yeah, maybe a little bit tilted fractionally. Maybe I've gone too big. Now, what's quite interesting, I think, is you can see that some of these, the literal, just, you know, it's not just the window frame, the panels themselves you can line up. So I can line that window up, and that's pretty good actually. But having lined up that window, not all of them are actually lining up properly down here, and that's partly because you end up not standing in exactly the right place. So what I might do then is I'm going to hold down a control button and just kind of allow me to kind of drag this over a little bit, something like that. Maybe drag that over there a little bit. Now I'm just doing this very, very roughly. Now if you were going to do this, you know, when you're actually doing this yourself, then what you do is you take a little bit more time to kind of line up. But having done that, just kind of do something like that. You know, that's not actually too bad. Now, what we've also got here, if we do the 100%, is you can see there's a bit of building that's sort of was built afterwards as well. So as I kind of drag this to the left, we start to see these ghostly figures starting to come in. We start to see the ivy slowly disappearing out, and the tree making an appearance on the left, until now we have all the figures. And then if I drag the slider back to the right a bit, the figures start to disappear, the ivy comes in, the windows become broken, and they all disappear. And there we have 100 years difference within the space of the movement of a slider. If I wanted, I could also maybe say desaturate this one, although that then takes away from the idea of it being completely modern. This is also slightly darker, so let's just, so what I might also do is just take the curves and brighten it a little bit. Also do that. And then if I put those three together into a group, then I can adjust the whole group as one. So if we wanted to keep it in black and white, you can kind of do that. But I wasn't, in the case of this, it was being kept in colour. So that's one of them. I'll just flip back for a moment. Right, so what you can see then is that for the case of the mill, that was pretty straightforward. So another one, let's do one. Okay, let's flip back here. Let's just close these, and what I will do is I'll show you the bridge. So that one where the bridge was working, and we had if I can find it. So let me drag that one in here, and then my photo. Now this was much trickier for to get to, because there was an embankment coming down the side, and I had to try and find the right place along the river to actually take this photo. The other thing is that it had been raining, so the river was higher than it was in this particular shot as well. So this was basically my shot. Now on this one, we had a couple of people on the bridge here, so I got a couple of people I knew who were, here we've got the people who were involved in the project, and we've got them on the bridge, though they're, at this point, I think they were in slightly the wrong side, and I got them to move over a little bit further in one of the other photos. However, so what we do then, again, if I copy that and paste it onto here, and again, this time, so if I just, again, put that to something like about 50%, Control T, make this bigger, and then what I'm trying to really do is line up the arch of this bridge here, like this. So if I can sort of get that there, and that's not too bad. Yeah, that there looks pretty accurate in terms of lining up that bridge, and we've got that top bit there. I think that bridge looks pretty good there. So I'll just enter that. Now I've missed out a little bit over on the right. I obviously didn't get the picture far enough over there. So what I will actually do here is I'll just do a little kind of content fill type thing. Is that going to work? No, it isn't. Oh well, doesn't matter. There's ways of just adding a little bit of tree here. The thing is that in the one underneath there wasn't tree here, and we can see building and all this kind of stuff has been hidden. So it's a kind of a much trickier kind of one to really line up. And even though when we do this, we can see that the bridge does line up, because there's so much more space over on the right. When we do this, it looks like this has been kind of taken from further away, but it's just that this side of the bridge here is now just completely lost behind branches and undergrowth. But you can see here that basically, again, we've got a good century's worth of bridge. But that was quite handy. There weren't actually that many places that I could scramble down that actually had a particular place to stand. So there's a good chance that I was standing probably pretty much where the person was who took that photo. So with some of these, you know, there is actually maybe sometimes there is only one place to stand. And you can kind of get away with it, and that makes life a lot easier. What have we got? Oh, Pat says, I love the bridge, lovely spot to stop and ponder. Favourite occupation? Absolutely, it is. There's lots of walks you can do around there now. And what was April saying? Oh, that tree sounds hundreds of generations, saw hundreds of generations, or certainly saw hundreds of years. Imagine it could talk. Okay, so then we've got things like, again, a fairly straightforward one would be the, let's flip back here, just close those ones. Another fairly straightforward one was that schoolhouse. So again, if I take both of those and drag them in here. So this is the original schoolhouse one. This is the one that I took. And, you know, at this point I'm standing there. I'm trying to work out roughly how far down the path I have to stand. And then we've got, but there's extra bits here. This one has 2 dormer windows. This one has 3. So again, select all, copy, paste it on here. Do that about 50%-ish. Enlarge this image. Might need to, actually I might not even need to tilt it, because I think this one's already slightly tilted, the image. Where are we going? A little bit bigger ish. Yeah, so again, I would play around with that a little bit longer, but you're trying to line up we've got the chimneys to line up, and we've got the door and these windows to line up. Now, again, not absolutely perfect. I did spend a little bit more time just kind of tweaking the edges of it, but to give you that idea, you can now see from that we've got you can see the painting coming in, you know, how the gutters have shifted, the fact that there's a new dormer window in there. I don't know whether it was always red, but also how the path has changed and the growth has changed and what have you as well. So it would have been nice to have a couple of people standing there. I think originally they were asked if they could be around, but it turned out they'd gone off on holiday that week or something like the current owners. Otherwise, what we might have tried to do is get them to sit there at the same time. Now, of course, again, what we've got here is we've got a nice sunny day. You can tell by the way the shadows are falling on the door, whereas on the day of the shoot itself, it was a bit dull and overcast. But it's that ability to be able to sort of slide backwards and forwards, which is what made it interesting. So that's kind of giving you an idea about the fairly straightforward ones. But of course, not all of them were. And the reason for that is, you see, each of the ones that I've shown you so far were pretty much flat on to what I was looking at. Where it became really difficult was when we were looking down the street. And at this point, this is where you realise how different lenses can massively affect the outcome. So what I'm going to do now then is I'm going to show you that one with the pub in it. And so this photo here, I mean, what's not to love about this photo? As well as the street, what really makes this photo is the people that are in it. However, like I say, we didn't have the luxury of the people for it, and we didn't have the luxury. And also within this one as well, there's a lovely bit of sunlight. The sunlight's coming across, cutting through this building here. Look at the shadow. We've got the shadows of the buildings. We've got the shadow of this man and this lad here. So there's a great light to it as well. And unfortunately, again, on the day that we did the shot. Now, we've got, here's a couple of photos that I want to show you. Two different versions of the same street. Which one is the right one to use? Now, the thing is that this one here, I'm zooming in. I'm standing, no, what is it? This one, I'm standing further back and zooming in. Is that right? Where's my focal length? 50mm. This, where's this one? Focal length 32mm. So this one, I'm standing further forward, but I'm zoomed more out. So further forward, zoomed out, or further back and zoomed in. And so you can see how actually it changes. The key thing here is the woman standing in the doorway and this Lexus sitting here. When I'm further back zoomed in, she's partially blocked by that, which is why I then kind of moved forward and zoomed out in order to make sure that she appeared in the shot. However, this becomes problematic because what happens is it changes all the lines and the distance between what's happening further down the street. So if I take this photo and I open this with Photoshop, and what we try and do is I'll copy that and paste it over the top here again. So we go to about 50%-ish and Control T. And now I've got one bit to line up here is we've got this little kind of entrance bit here. And we've got a little doorway here. So I can kind of sort of line it up there, except for the fact that these chimneys look pretty small, and the roof line isn't quite there. And as we go further down into the street, the distance between the height of the buildings gets further and further apart. And over on the right-hand side, none of this is lining up at all. So that's, there's something not quite working there. Whereas if let's close that schoolhouse because that keeps confusing me. So if I then take the other shot, which is where we were a little bit more zoomed in, and then open that with Photoshop, and select all, copy, and paste. Okay, let's remove that one and take this down to a partial size. What we find is, let's just try and line that up. Now again, this is a bit small, so trying to line, if I try and line up this side, it's a slightly better fit. This isn't perfect by any stretch, though it does work a little bit better. However, I've still got a problem with roofs and things not really lining up to the same degree. So what you kind of then end up having to do is really start distorting, kind of grabbing corners and pulling them in and about a bit to sort of try and line up something like on that side. But then can I do it on, where do I line it up on this side? It gets pretty tricky trying to figure out exactly where. You see the buildings are taller on this side. So it's not just a case of whether I was standing further forward or back. It's a case of whether I was standing slightly more to the left or slightly more to the right. And so we can now see that it's sort of, again, we're kind of getting trickier, and it's getting really difficult to line up these chimney pots over here. So at this point, kind of what you can end up trying to get the thing to line up as I want could even require me, I might sort of copy this bit of the photo and paste so that I can then just line up this side of it. So in this case, if I do this, and then maybe I can sort of try a little bit more. Yeah, I've got to actually kind of pull that in a little bit like that to create just a bit more in the way of a perspective on it. But it's really not particularly straightforward. Now that feels like it's getting slightly more there in some parts. You see, this is the bit I might get the pub here a little bit more lined up, except for the fact that the background is going more and more out, and the chimneys aren't really lining up either. So you can see the incredible problem of where you happen to be standing at the time isn't really going to help. So you can kind of do that with one side and then do it with the other side and then try and mix them up and meld them together. So in the end, this one took me absolutely ages to do. And what I did end up with is, I will open this one here. This was the final picture that essentially ended up overlaying on top of this, so that when I slide down, I didn't get the chimneys exactly right, but this was about as close as I could get. And this took way too long, is really how long it took. I don't know how many hours I was playing around. You see, I mean, part of the problem is there's things like, there's a building here which doesn't exist anymore, or there's a building here which has had an extension up into it. So the roof lines don't necessarily line up. They line up slightly more better here, but down at the bottom of the street, the bottom part of the street changed considerably. So trying to get that line up was really, really tricky to kind of do. And it's in the end ended up being a whole bunch of Photoshop and grabbing sections and moving them and overlaying them. And where you can really notice the difference is where I did one side to the other. Because if I show you, let's go back to this version here, a little giveaway is you'll notice there's a white line runs all the way down the middle of the road here. On my fixed version, you'll notice there's no white line. And that's because essentially what I did was, because I had to drag half of the image over on the left-hand side, I had to make wider. It ended up overlapping the other side of the photo. So I then had to kind of mask out. So it's all a bit of trickery of essentially two halves of a photo merged together, and each half has been continually kind of distorted and shifted to try and make it fit. So if you kind of go back to understanding that difference between on where you're standing, there's a huge difference between whether you are standing forward and going wide angle, or whether you're standing back and zooming in. And one of the things that I came to realize too late was that when you're looking at the kind of cameras and specifically lenses that they were using 100 to 150 years ago, they tended to be the equivalent of a kind of 200 or 300 millimeter lens. Now, that's not to say that they were big zoom. They still kind of maybe would seem a mid-range, except for the fact that the amount that they distort or don't distort or pull things together is more in that range. So if you're standing in the same spot and you are using a wide angle lens, it is just not going to replicate. And even if you get the buildings right in the foreground, they are going to go massively out by the time you get into the distance in the background. So really, that's the kind of, if you ever decided that you wanted to do this kind of thing, your tips and tricks then for replicating old photos on the street and where you stand with the camera. First of all, absolutely have some kind of reference, whether it's on your tablet or whether you've actually printed one out and you've got it there. The next problem is actually trying to judge by your eye, because your eye fills in the gaps in a way that the paper doesn't. And it's extraordinarily difficult. I thought I had everything lined up. I thought, well, okay, I'm looking in the back here and I've got the edge of this building here and the edge of this building here, and that should be fine, except for the fact that I hadn't taken into consideration necessarily, like I say, how far the gaps were in the distance. If you're doing a flat on, like the schoolhouse, or like the bridge, or like the mill building itself with the workers standing outside the front, it's much, much easier to then, because you're not having to worry about how much that will change as you go deeper into the picture. But if you are shooting down a street, where you stand, you are much better off standing further back and zooming in, and use your biggest zoom lens you can and stand as far back as you can to try and replicate it. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about with that. I hope you found that sort of at least vaguely interesting. A couple more comments. John's checking in from Columbus, Ohio. Vici says, in India, the roads and buildings change rapidly. Such an exercise is difficult. What you're doing is incredible, beautiful. Well, it was a fun project to do. It really was. Oh, April says, a difficult project indeed. Yes, and this is the thing, is that it was much more... It's like so many of these things. It's only after you've done them do you realise actually how difficult it is to do them. You start off with this idea of, oh, well, that'll be pretty straightforward. I'll just stand here and I'll go click and that'll be easy. And then you stand there and you go click and it doesn't look anything like you expect it to, even though some of the buildings might still be in the same place. That pub is still in the same place, while some buildings have had extensions up into their roofs and other buildings have been removed altogether. Still quite a few, because it's an old village, it hasn't overly changed that much. Still many of the buildings are in the same place and the chimney stacks are in the same place, but suddenly nothing is lining up. But the big key thing is, if you are going to do that, you have to understand the lenses that were being used 100 and 150 years ago, that they really didn't do wide angle. So trying to replicate it on your phone will not work, because these things all have wide angle built into them. Use your biggest zoom, stand as far back as you can, and then stand further back than you think you need to and zoom in, and then I think you're more likely to end up with an image. Then when you get it into Photoshop, do that sort of 50% overlay and keep kind of grabbing corners and twisting and moving and distorting until you can line it up as the best as possible. And what you might have to do is actually crop the image into 2 or 3 sections and line up each of the sections and then kind of merge them together as well. So potentially a lot of work to do. But when you do it, and you can do that kind of sliding in and out 50%, and see the ghostly figures appear and disappear, I think there's something incredibly magical about it. So if you have the time and the inclination, I think it's quite a bit of fun to do. Peter said, well preserved, Kim, a difficult project indeed. Thanks, Peter. Right. Okay. So that's the kind of what I wanted to talk about with that. A little reminder here that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, you would like to support them in some way, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. You can even buy me more than one coffee if you wish. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the critique section. Oh, actually, I tell you what, just before we do move on to the critique section, a quick reminder that next week is the Architectural Photography Challenge. I'll talk again about this at the end of the podcast, but just a quick reminder for anybody who doesn't quite make it to the end because you have to rush off for any emergencies. Last week, we looked at those amazing pictures by Peter and KPK Photography, and we talked in depth about the idea of architectural photography and different ways you can approach it. And so what I did was I set the Architectural Photo Challenge for next week, which will be Sunday the 22nd. So try and get your photos in by, if you can, Friday the 20th, Saturday 21st at the latest. and we're going to look at see how people have responded to the architectural photography challenge. It's not a strong spot for me, so that's why I called in Peter and all the fantastic information he gave us last week. And so I'm also joining in this challenge. Earlier this week, I popped down Castle Douglas High Street with my camera to sort of start looking around. And again, it's not that easy. I thought I knew the town fairly well, but it's interestingly, when you take the camera and you start looking out for architectural details, there's all sorts of things you see that you've never really noticed before. So I know I did a wander around with my camera for about an hour, came back, looked at the photos, and realised I need to go out again. So worth doing, worth playing with. So we will come back to that at the end of the podcast. Meanwhile then, so now we're going to move on to the critique section. The critique section, this is the part where you get to send me images, ask for a bit of feedback, and I'll do my best to help you past any sticking points. And we've had two people this week, Russ and Rosemary have both sent in images. And Russ, in fact, actually, I know Russ isn't able to join us live today, but I think he will be hopefully will be popping back in and watching the recording of this, especially as we're doing critique on his image. But it's Russ's birthday today. So happy birthday, Russ. Hope you have a good one. And yeah, lots of cake and lots of celebration. Right, okay, so after happy birthday to Russ. So Russ's picture. So what Russ did, Russ said that basically his problem was that, he missed the pod. He wasn't able to make it along to the podcast that I did a few weeks ago, which was, we were talking about the notion of online photo competitions and photos that we take which don't necessarily perform as well as we expected them to. Now, hold on a sec. I've just kind of realised here I just need to quickly do something. Because, is that right? Let me just save that image into there and minimise that and go back to here, and let me just double check what I'm doing. Is that... No, that's fine. I'm okay. Right. For a moment, I thought I had the, wrong. Doesn't matter. Right. This is my brain working too fast for my mouth. Okay. So what? So yes. So what Russ did? Let's show you the photo Russ did. Let's just. Oh, I've lost it. Oh no. Open with photos. So Russ sent this photo. And what he said was, I missed the podcast on why images perform poorly in crowd voting competitions. That's right, that's what I was starting to say. So a couple of weeks ago, we did a whole section on sending your images that you always feel ought to do well, but somehow never really do. Why not? Let's see if we can kind of get to the bottom of this. And so Ross says, I thought I'd take the opportunity to submit this image. This was taken at Wild Place, a satellite site of Bristol Zoo on the M5 junction at Cribbs Causeway. I did do some editing in the shot, mainly contrast and vibrancy to bring out the colours. It's done okay in some challenges, but it's certainly not performed as well as I'd hoped or expected. So what have we got here? We've got three cheetahs together, and it looks like probably a mum and two equivalent of teenage cubs, I suppose, slightly older cubs. It looks like probably it's the mother there who's turned around and looking straight at the camera. So a fun image. I like the way that it's cropped off. We've got the camera and the sharpness, the focus then on the mother's face here. The background drops into bokeh. In fact, actually, and then that adds sort of slightly patterned textured effect, which also echoes in some way the spots on the fur of the cheetahs. So initially you go, well, okay, why is, it's a good photo. I'd be perfectly happy if I had that photo, and I would probably be sticking into the online competitions. But Russ says it's not performing as well as perhaps it could. So the question is why? And really, if we go back to some of the things that we were talking about with the online competitions, part of this is the fact that people aren't spending the time to really study the photo. When you're looking at when you've got these online competitions like Guru Shots and PhotoCrowd and ViewBug, very often people are scrolling through these images at high speed, particularly something like Guru Shots. At least with PhotoCrowd, generally speaking, I think you tend to you rate the images one at a time. Whereas with Guru Shots, you have a whole screen and you're scrolling through the screen and you're just clicking on anything that leaps out at you. So there might be less than a quarter of a second spent on any image. And what I would say about this image is, once I've spent a couple of seconds on it, it's very obvious what I'm looking at. If you are spending only a quarter of a second on it, it's maybe not quite as obvious what you're looking at. That we've got the head here, we've got this head in amongst a whole pile of spots. Now, we know, because we spent more than 2 seconds looking at it, that there are in fact 3 cheetahs in this picture. But at a very, very, very quick glance, we see a face and a mass of spots. We don't necessarily see that there's 2 other cheetahs in here. And if it's just the one cheetah, then the whole shape of the body doesn't quite look right. And if it doesn't quite look right, we've kind of skimmed past before we've had a chance to really understand what it is we're looking at. And I think basically, Russ, the biggest problem is that it takes you a moment to realise what you're looking at. Now, if you are in an offline competition, if this is hanging on a wall, even if this is with a camera club or something like that, but somebody's got a printed version, or somebody is going to spend more than 2 seconds on this, I think they're actually part of the fact that it takes you a moment to see what it is part of the fun of it. You go, oh, that's a cheetah. Oh, it's got cubs with it. Oh, wow, cool. I like that. I love the fact that the mother is essentially camouflaged within her cubs. That's a really cool idea. And that's actually the strength of it. But that very moment of hesitation, the fact you have to work out what you're seeing, is the very thing that plays against it in an online competition where nobody is giving it the minimum of 2 seconds that you need. You're only getting a fraction of a second. And in that fraction of a second, it just isn't doing it. I personally, the way around that, if you want to do a way around that, I think ends up being something like what you have to do is essentially you have to kind of create more differentiation between the mother and the cubs. And so in this case, so for example, just a very quick kind of thing here, what I'll do is I'll take the curves and we'll create a darker, not that, so just grab that, just make that a little bit darker. Now, I'm then going to fill that, and then what we're going to do is we're going to paint back in, say, the, that's 100%, the fur of the cubs. In fact, actually, we'll just have to be pretty much, we'll have to do that background as well, because otherwise that's going to look a bit odd, I think. Now again, we're just doing this very, very quickly, but to give you an idea that now, if you're doing something like this, so that the cub's fur is now darker and differentiated from the mother, now when you look at this, the mother leaps out straight away. You can act completely and utterly, you know what it is you're looking at. Now, is this a better photo than your original? No. Not in terms of, for me who spent time looking at it, I much prefer this version. If you're talking about online competitions though, I'd be very surprised if this version, or an equivalent, didn't actually work out better. Another option is to, or you go the opposite direction, where you essentially, I didn't mean to do that, curves, where you lighten everything, except for the mother. And then if we just kind of drag that in, something like that, then again, you can see the mother stands out against the cubs. And again, is it a better photo? Personally, I don't think so. However, it's back to this basic problem that on an online competition, people are not spending enough time. So that's why this one would get lost. So I hope that helps, Russ. Like I say, we know full well just because something does well or doesn't do well in one of these online competitions isn't necessarily reflective of how good the photo actually is in a kind of in a studied environment. But if you're talking about how to sort of essentially improve your ratings on a particular photo, you've got to work your brain around the fact of how people are viewing that photo, the absolute minimal time that they're spending on it, and so to appeal more to them, you have to do the work for them. If they have to take time to interpret, they won't, and that's why it will get marked down. So, anyway, hope that gives you a sense of what's going on. Right, okay, lots of happy birthday Russes here. So I will say the live comments that appear here, as you're watching this live, they're here. When this stops being live, there's something in the region of about a kind of 18 to 20 hour time where YouTube is processing this video. And during that time, all these live comments don't appear. So, but after that, anything that's more than a day old, it's then processed, all the comments appear. So if you are watching this back more than 24 hours after it was broadcast, then you can follow all the live comments. So Russ, if you are watching this, you can also kind of looking and see all the people who are wishing you happy birthday. Right. Okay, other things. Meg says, great photo, Russ. April says, I think the photo would be great with a colour orange. I love the two fangs, very cool. And I love the orange eyes when you're kind of cropped in. So yes, the idea you could crop in closer is another way of doing it. But then, of course, you're missing out more on the cubs in the background. Meg says, I can see this photo in a frame on the wall. Yes, it is. It's that kind of photo. It would look great if you are prepared to spend the time looking at it. Pat says, is it worth pandering to folk too lazy to appreciate a beautiful photo? Aha! Really good point, Pat. Really good point. And this is the photographer's dilemma, or the photographer's dilemma who's putting stuff into online competitions. And this was kind of the thrust of one of the big thrusts of what I was talking about a few weeks ago when I talked about why don't the pictures do well in the online competitions, is that different people are viewing. If you are doing a photo for yourself and you are happy with it, then hey, you're happy with it. No problem. Doesn't matter whether anybody else likes it as long as you're happy with it. The problem comes is if you are doing a photo which you want a response from other people, and in that case there's a who are you showing it to and under what circumstances are they viewing it. That's what the key is, and that different people are viewing it in different circumstances. You look at a photo different if it's framed on a wall than you do on a device like a phone or a tablet at high speed. So if you want to do well in the competitions, you have to create photos that will do well in the online competitions. But those very same photos, the adjustments you would make for an online competition, wouldn't necessarily work with, say, a camera club. Camera clubs also have their own set of ways of judging photos, which wouldn't necessarily do so well for people buying the prints. So if you're doing a particular state fair or craft fair or something like that, and you're selling prints of your work, you're going to sell them differently. If you've got a gallery where it's seen as a high-end art gallery, again, different kinds of photos and different kinds of processing are going to appeal. So everything is about how your image is appealing to the audience it's in front of. And if you are going for these online competitions, those are specific kinds of audience. So if you want your photo to do well there, you kind of end up needing to make adjustments that will appeal to that audience, even if those adjustments wouldn't appeal to a different audience. And that's the key bit, is there's the creativity, what you create, which is it satisfying you? And then there's the creativity, which is it satisfying somebody else? And which somebody else is it you're trying to satisfy? And what adjustments do you have to make? Because those adjustments are going to be different to how you're looking at it. So, hope that answers you, Pat. Right, okay, so next photo I want to look at is Rosemarie's. Now, hang on a sec, there's somebody called Politics Ruins Everything. Well, it probably certainly does. I'm not entirely sure what your actual name is, though. So, Politics Ruins Everything. If you'd like to leave a name, I'll say hi. But anyway, sorry I missed most of this. Travelling on a plane. Right, okay. Well, I mean, so we've got, well, this is kind of fun actually. So this person is traveling on a plane and VG is traveling on a train. I don't think I've had such a mobile viewing platform viewers before now. So that's kind of fun. Anybody in a car hopefully while somebody else is driving? Anybody listening to this online as they're walking? Right, okay, so let's move on to Rosemary. So Rosemary sent in this photo, and she says, this photo looks over a neighbour's pasture. The sense I had with the trees disappearing into the fog was endless, with the trees merging into the fog that went up as far as the eye could see. It was what made me grab the camera, and boy did I have to catch this quickly. But actually, I'll tell you what, let's just open this in Photos. I clicked something wrong before and it's now automatically opening in Photoshop. But anyway, let's come back to it. So here's the shot. I was elbow deep in a time sensitive task, so I only had time to grab the camera and shoot it with its current settings, hoping I could recreate the sense the scene gave me later in post-processing. I've watched these same weather conditions repeat a lot over the last 6 weeks. We've had a lot of fog in that time. To see if there might be a chance to recreate the scene with intention and slowness. But this is the only time I've seen the layers present themselves exactly like this. The raw photo is horrible, which I expected. Everything about it is wrong, from the white balance to the composition. But in post-production, I was able to correct some of this with the sliders and cloning the fence posts and getting rid of a junk pile that was too distracting. Cropping. My question is about the crop. Does the vertical crop with an emphasis on the sky convey the sense of endlessness? Or is it just too much empty and feeling unbalanced? Or is it not enough, leaving me caught in the boring middle ground? Okay, so what we're up against here then is the fact that there's mist, there's fog that changes the light, changes what you can see, what you can't see. It's both the photographer's dream and the photographer's nightmare. Part of what we love about photography is being able to capture scenes that we don't usually see with the naked eye, or we've seen it, we know it's unusual, and we are trying to find a way to recreate that feeling in what we photograph. And it's not easy to do, and fog is can be one of those kind of nightmare things to do. So to show you then Rosemary's original, it should be the next one here. So this is the original one. So as Rosemary said, she was busy doing something else, didn't have time to do this, essentially glanced out the window, saw this, grabbed the camera, took the photo, and then out of that photo edited it into this one. She knows the color balance is wrong, she knows all the bits, nothing's quite right exactly how she wanted, but this was the one she managed to take. And even though it's been foggy since, she's not been able to kind of get the same kind of mood that she wanted afterwards. So does that crop work? Now, I think part of the problem we're up against here is, certainly if you're talking about the idea of the online competitions, we talked the other week about the fact that portrait, vertical type crops never work as well as landscape. And black and white rarely works as well as colour, apart from unless it's specifically called black and white, or quite often some portraits work better in black and white. And I'm going to show you a photo for a moment that I did. I created this photo once. In fact, actually, let's just again open that with Photos. So sheep in a fog. And like you on your one, what I did was I had a big bit of sky above it. And I really liked the emphasis of the fact that loneliness, that emptiness. And this one always did quite poorly in the online competitions, which I found disappointing. After I'd sort of made this connection between vertical and not doing quite so well, I decided to I went back and found, essentially, I think it was probably the next photo I took on the thing, which was this one, where I just turned the camera sideways and I did a horizontal version of it. And this one always does better than the other one. It's a different mood, it's a different feel of a photo, because now we've got many more sheep in it, so it doesn't feel quite as lonely, I think. We've still got layers going back. The wall and the tree in the background are kind of disappearing into the fog. We know it's a thick fog day. We've still got these sheep in the foreground, heads up, looking to say, what's this photographer doing, pointing that camera at us? But because there's more sheep in the field, it's much more a sheep scene than it is necessarily a kind of lonely fog scene, which I think you get a little bit more here with less sheep in. But without doubt, this one does better. And that's because, again, online competitions, what we found is that landscape format photos tend to take up more of the display screen than portrait ones, and so essentially we've got more view time. They take up more in the space of the eye of the viewer, and so in essence get a fraction of a second more viewing time. So you're more likely to, it's less likely to be missed. And the other thing is quite often what happens is, so there are some sites where what happens is they square crop everything like a kind of Instagram page until you click on it. And that can be absolutely disastrous for something like this, because if I do, let's say, square roughly that, and I have that in the middle, and I square crop that, we've lost a big chunk of the photo. And in fact, even worse is if it gets square cropped at the top, because sometimes it doesn't always get cropped where you expect it to. And so that's missed the sheep altogether. So how much of a photo is that? That's barely a photo at all. A little bit of an out of focus misty tree in the bottom, which again, you're not totally even sure what it is. It's more like a smudge. So we end up with that problem with yours then, Rosemary, that actually, if you consider the idea of what might be a square crop of this, if that got cropped at the top, there's virtually no picture, even if it got kind of cropped somewhere in the middle. We're missing most of the picture, we're missing part of the thing. So to go back to your original photo here, there's part of the thing that, okay, let's just turn that to black and white. Now, you obviously took more time in the post-processing. I'm just going to do a very quick black and white conversion. It's quite dark as well, so what I might do is just take the levels and brighten it a little bit more, maybe in the middle, something like that. Now, what you did was you kind of cropped a chunk, something like that. And then you didn't particularly like this wood pile and the fence posts in the foreground, so you spent a bit of time cloning that out. Yeah, there's your one. That's my kind of quick edit of it. However, if you were to do a landscape crop, what we might end up with is something more like this. Now at this point, we've got the trees in, but now we've got more other aspects of the foreground. Now, does that matter? Now, you didn't really want them in because you kind of felt that they were kind of getting in the way. However, and there is a bit I wouldn't necessarily stand in this place, and I'm not totally happy with the way that bit comes in here. But by having a little bit of foreground, what it does do is it starts to give us layers. And I think when we go back to your picture here, one of the problems that you basically got, Rosemary, is the fact that you're not getting the sense of layers. That front line of trees acts as a wall, and then because of the way it fades at the bottom, the next lines of trees behind have just blurred into almost like a hedge at the bottom, and we're not getting the distinct part of the picture. So let's just take that back to open for the moment. If I'm looking in the colour here, I can see that we've got the trees here, and then those trees are further behind. There's more of a sense of layering up. But with your one here, there's less of a sense of layering up. And in essence, the key to fog photos is about having layers so that you can see how much effect the fog is happening. So let me just show you one more photo to give an example of, here's a black and white fog photo of trees. And in this case, what happens is, because we then have smaller trees in the background, larger trees in the foreground, there's not just smaller trees, but the smaller trees get fainter as they go back. So, you know, we're getting these kind of layers and layers. So there's very faint ones at the back here, mid-faint ones in the and then dark ones in the foreground. This is really giving us a much deeper sense of depth to the photo. And primarily, I think, with fog photos, trying to get that sense of depth is one of the most important aspects of it. With this in mind, what I think I'm going to do is, in a couple of weeks' time, certainly after the architectural photo challenge, I think what I might do is I might actually do a podcast about taking photos in fog. I probably won't do a fog challenge because that's going to be just too difficult. We can't rely that everybody in the world is going to get a foggy day sometime within the week of the challenge. But I will talk through more specifically. I'll dig through my archives. I'll find some more photos that I've taken within the fog to try and give you an idea of how to really maximize on the idea of when fog appears, how to get that real sense of silence and emptiness, that and eerie beauty that fog can so often give us. So I hope that gives you some ideas there, Rosemary. That, you know, certainly in terms of, I can understand why you wanted to go high, but like I say, that would work against you in some of the online competitions, just like those sheep photos. The high one worked against me. But having cropped out everything else that gives you a reference point, it's just meant that you've got it's like one flat line of trees. And I think you're then missing the depth, and I think the depth is the key part to it. So that's pretty much, like I said, I hope that helps, Rosemary. So that's the end of the critique section. So what I want to just talk a little bit about now then is that notion of the next week we have the architectural photo challenge. So like I say, if you missed it, or you had to run away early and you've had a chance, go back to last week, episode 108, where I talk in depth about different kinds of architectural photography, the wonderful photos and notes and tips and tricks given to us by Peter. And we went through that, and that should give you a lot of inspiring ideas. Then do your photos, edit them, send just one per person. Try and get it into me by Friday next week. So that would be Friday the 13th of... Friday the 20th. Friday the 20th of May. Get your images sent to me. You can either go to the Facebook page, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, Facebook group. Find that group, just type Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres and post it in there. Or if you don't do Facebook, email it to me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. Now, spell Ayres right, Ayres. So kim@kimayres.co.uk, and the image will. Tell me a little bit about the photo that you're sending in for the architectural challenge. Tell me what the building is, and any bits of challenge that you actually really kind of came up against in order to take the photo, any difficulties you had, any little stories, because I think often it's the stories that are as much fun about the photo. We're doing the challenge. Like I say, I'm going to join in too. I'll try and create an architectural photo for this challenge, and we'll have a bit of fun with that. And so next week we'll go through the photos, read the stories, and hopefully end up feeling a bit more inspired. So that's it. Thank you very much to everybody who's turned up, been watching, been leaving comments, to Russ and Rosemary for sending in images. Oh, one last thing briefly, because I always remember something right at the end. With the architectural photo challenge, I will put this into the Facebook, but I got a comment from Ruth, and Ruth said the British Architectural Library at the Royal Institute of British Architects, RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects, of which I was a director, has a collection of about 1.5 million architectural photos dating from the dawn of photography. Almost all predate Photoshop. Many can be seen on RIBA Pix, so the RIBAPIX.com. I'll put this into the Facebook page. I might also put it into the description of the YouTube thing for next week's one as well. So that's a great place to go and look for a bit of inspiration. There also, if you happen to have taken any amazing architectural photo, so they say they're also always looking out for high quality content to add to their architectural collections. Whether you're a professional or talented amateur, if you're interested in submitting architectural images on a shared reproduction fee, shared or shared credit basis, we would love to hear from you. So they're on the lookout for collection photos, and sometimes they sell these photos and you can get a selection of the fee for that as well. So that's RIBAPIX.com. Go check it out. And thank you to Ruth for letting us know about that. Right, that's us. Thank you once again for everybody who's turned up. Find that one. Yeah, that's it. Look forward to seeing you all next week, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you're going to put in for the Architectural Photo Challenge. Take care. Bye-bye.